Welcome to The Christian Atheist, where faith and reason fuse in the incarnation. Episode number 129, Chatterview with Rachael Thomas, Part 2.
So I guess that's the nutshell version of my testimony. Now here I am. I've been teaching in private academic schools for my entire adult life. I graduated from Bryn Mawr with my BA in mathematics when was in a PhD track for mathematics. And it was time for me to take a break from school. I had enough for an MA, so I took the MA to quote unquote take a break and get back to it. And we all know how those things kinds of work. So I was in a year whose first name was 19 and I'm still on my break. But I took a job at Lancaster Country Day School as a math teacher, even though I wasn't really qualified for it, and found this deep need among high school students in particular and academically minded college-bound high school students that were experiencing the same things that I had been experiencing when I was that age, and I couldn't name it. I didn't know what I was missing, but I knew that I was missing something. And it's kind of been my mission field ever since. So I went from Lancaster Country Day School. I was there for 10 years. Then when my children were school-aged, we switched to Hershey Christian School, which felt like a better fit for them. And then that school merged with Lancaster Mennonite School and now campus at Lancaster Mennonite School. And wherever I go, I find this just huge mission opportunity to reach people with the 100% faith in God, as the Bible tells us about. We don't have to compromise either one of those things. We don't have to compromise academics and we don't have to compromise our faith. They exist together. And let me tell you about it,
I do have one question to sort of move us backwards. I'm interested in how, since you came first, I assume you came to Christ first. What happened to your dad? Because being from the academic community, your dad came to Christ too. How did that come about?
I'm sorry, you froze there for a minute. Are we talking about my dad?
Yeah, I was just sort of curious.
No, that's fine. So my dad actually came from a more solid faith background. My grandparents were strong believers, which I see in hindsight, but he had been drafted and went to Vietnam, and that was a troubling experience for him, blah, blah, blah. But when he was baptized, his testimony standing there in the water talking about how he came to Christ, and I had never heard these stories before, he said that he probably knew Jesus as a child. He probably had made that decision, but just had walked away. And through things he had seen and things he thought, it's walked away from that, but then was reinvigorated and kind of his faith was reanimated, if you will, when we were reading through the Bible. And he could reconcile the smart thing with the God thing.
That's kind of like John.
That was
John.
Like me too. I was as
walked away.
5, 6, 7 years old. I accepted Christ and then
walked away
in college, after Bible college, actually.
5 years.
For 25 years. I called myself an atheist.
You didn't get saved the last couple of years. You were saved.
No,
you came back.
A lot of the people at church, I came to the church that Jenny was at, and I told them I was an atheist, and so they tried to convert me to Christ. I said, you can't do that. It's not possible. And Jenny said, no, you don't understand. He already does. He just doesn't. He doesn't understand himself. He's too stupid. She didn't say that. She didn't say it. She never says that. But I say that because it was a period of 25 years of turning away from truth or finding my way back to truth in a more vigorous and real way. So let's see here. I'm looking over the testimony that you sent. You mentioned that the Bible, when you first opened it, was quite confusing. So how did that first initial approach affect you? And what was it that in the Bible affected you most deeply?
Yeah, so the first couple chapters of Genesis, I'm approaching this like it's going to be Canterbury Tales or Beowulf or something, right? This is just an ancient text and it's a story, but it's different. It's so different than those things. Not the least of reasons is because it's written by so many different human authors. So the different books sound very different. Read all the tales in the Canterbury Tales, they're all kind of similar, right? It's all the same guy, just different stories. And or even the old, like the Iliad and the Odyssey and all of those things, they're so similar, even though we're different, written by different human authors, they had very similar themes. But even Genesis, Exodus, and Numbers, for example, they read very differently. They have different emphases. Throw Job in there and you got a whole other. it surprised me with how different everything was, where I couldn't just say, all right, I've understood this first chapter, this first book. Now it's going to be the same thing with different characters. It wasn't that. And some of the stuff I just read through, like, okay, yeah, Seth begat this guy who begat that guy, blah, blah, blah. But I was looking for some things, like I'm a numbers person, I'm a math person. When we get to the building of the tabernacle, I thought they had their math wrong. And I was like, this confirms everything I've always learned. People who do the Bible aren't smart enough to know anything else. And the tabernacle is actually 2 squares. And if you know anything about like even architecture in that day, or the architecture, and we're looking for the golden mean, 1.618, right? Length to width ratio, 1.618. You can see it all over the pyramids in Egypt. Like that's the number that we're looking for in those measurements. And it wasn't there. It was 2 squares and everything was square. The curtains in the tabernacle were square. The altar was square, and it was wrong. And I thought, these guys are dumb. It's wrong. But then I got to the Ark of the Covenant. The Ark of the Covenant has one set of dimensions that's square and one set of the dimensions that's golden, 1.618. And I thought, oh, well, that's interesting, because maybe they did know about the golden mean. You know, like why would, if everything was just, they were making it squares because that was simple and that was easy to understand, then why would they have put the 1.618 in there? Why was that one 5x3 or whatever the dimensions were? And then I went back and I looked at some other things, and the altar is actually square in one dimension and golden in another dimension. And the temple is actually 2 squares. So now I'm looking for numbers, right? So now I go back and I look at some more numbers, and I find this fun pattern that a lot of people don't point out, because who cares about them? Those parts of the Bible are the ones that everybody reads through and is like, yeah, and then there's some numbers. And then we get to another story, and then this guy goes on this quest. Okay. But the divine things are all square. Where God is are squares. And even the altar and the Ark of the Covenant, like one of those dimensions is square. And then where human things are, the dimensions are golden, or it's Fibonacci numbers. And that's what I understand right here in this earth. All of the numbers are Fibonacci number, all of the ratios. You can't, if you're not looking at the video, you don't see me curling my fist there, but right, like my fist curls up because the ratio of the lengths of my finger are in golden ratios. And that's why things work the way trees branch, or the way flowers petal, or whatever. Like things work in this world because they have those numbers. But the God numbers, the divine things, weren't those. They were square.
That is interesting.
It's so interesting.
That's
right.
Amazing.
Oh, and I could go, if you had forever, I could talk about it forever.
Do you have places to go to read about it, articles and research? And
I don't, other than things that I've written.
Okay, I would love to read what you have then.
No idea how deep it goes, because
I think I do know how deep, because I'm learning all.
Yeah, right. Okay, and then so there's this thing called gnomonic growth, GNOMONIC, like gnomons. When you have a shape that grows on itself, kind of like a tree grows as a little sapling, and then the next part of the tree grows outside that and outside that. So you add on, or like shells, like a chambered nautilus, little organism is in there, and then it makes the next chamber and the next chamber. Okay, so lots of things in nature grow this way gnomonically, and the ending shape. Yeah, right, exactly. Very much related to fractals. Oh my word, we don't even talk about how God is represented in fractals in the Bible. That'll be a whole other infinity time that you want me to talk. So when something grows gnomonically, the ending shape has to be similar, like mathematically similar, the same ratios to the original shape. So some shapes, it's hard for me to explain without drawing it. Some shapes, like a triangle, I could add another triangle onto the side, and it would like tilt, and it would be similar to itself, right, by adding. Or a rectangle. If I have a rectangle like this, I can add a bigger rectangle down here and make the whole big thing similar to the original. It turns out, and this is a very well-known fact in mathematics, that that golden ratio, that 1.618, 1 plus the square root of 5/2, this number that's all over human-made things and natural things in this world. This number is everywhere. The dimensions of that rectangle, they are the rectangle whose mnemonic complement, like the thing that you add to it to make it similar to itself. The part that's missing is a square.
Okay.
So, right. So things in this world, this number, this 1.618, which is like this mysterious, why is it everywhere? I don't know. I'll tell you why it's everywhere. Right. It's everywhere because it's the shape, it's the number, the dimension, the ratio that is missing its square part.
Yeah.
So the heavens declare the glory of God. or like that no man is without excuse. It's not just, well, the heavens are big, so God is big and everything. No, that, or like, who has measured the earth, asks Job. Not just like how big it is, but the actual measurement, this number that controls everything from the trees that I see to the way my bones come together to literally my DNA. The length to width ratio of one cycle of your DNA is 1.618. So down to our very core, this number that controls us is the number that is showing it's completed by something square.
Right. And it's in there. It's in God's word.
It's in there. Yep. Yeah. And that square is the Lord. That square is God. All of the divine things were square. If you read in Revelation, the New Jerusalem, everything's square. The city is laid out like a square, right? The temple, squares. The altar, part square, part human. The Ark of the Covenant, part square, part human. Again, like mind-blowing. These things are illustrating for us. It's in Scripture, and it's in Scripture, and it's
the Scripture itself is God, part human. Because the human authors, it's fantastic. Wow.
Did you know that there's exactly one number that is both Fibonacci and square? It's 144.
We were just reading.
We're just running through Revelation right now.
Yep. It doesn't surprise me in the least. When that was one of the things that really got me. That I was like, oh my gosh, there's only one number that's both, and it's 12 squared.
Okay. And I'm thinking, for him who has wisdom to understand, God invites us to understand, and it's a number.
Let him calculate the number.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
That's amazing.
You're talking, Jenny is of the two of us, the mathematician. So you're speaking more her language than mine.
Not like you are. But to learn what you have, oh my word, I would love to.
Yeah, if you have stuff written, love to see it.
I cannot find, when you look for stuff showing God, in all of in math and in all of stuff, it's always stuff to show, proving, like the Christian ways, right? It never goes any deeper. Do you know what I'm saying? And it's like I'm trying to find stuff. I can barely find anything.
Yeah, we're kind of frustrated now with the Christian community because it's leaving us high and dry. It's just like there's nothing. I don't want to read another book by Paul Tripp or any. Those things are kind of just this little surface stuff. Boring.
Yep. And when you find somebody, so a lot of, I love Benoit Mandelbrot. He was a mathematician from Poland in mid of the 20th century, right? He's no longer living. He died about 10 years ago. But the Mandelbrot set, if you're familiar with fractals, like that was named after him. He's the guy who actually came up with the word fractal. A lot of his early research was about the placement of the stars in the universe and the pattern that they followed. And unsurprisingly, and like that's another rabbit trail you can go down, all the scriptures about stars and how they line up with Mandelbrot's research about like the actual placement of the star. It's not random. They're not randomly put up there. And a lot of what his research said basically confirms that God placed the stars there in this fractal pattern that we see elsewhere. It's the same as like the Cantor sets all over the place in mathematics. You can't find that research. If you look up Mandelbrot's star research, you see one word that he said, and then 10 other people who took that one word that he said and use it to talk about the Big Bang or something. But you can't find it, which is super frustrating.
And I'm not talking about just from the atheist side. I'm talking about even from the Christian side. It seems like we have so much that we can, like what you found, and it's not out there. I'm trying to find it. I just can't find anything.
Yeah, have we, as a church, like decided to abandon the intellect? I don't know.
Oh man,
it's frustrating.
It's frustrating.
And we're not the only ones that feel it. I have another friend that I talk to too that is like, where do I find a church that I can actually be fed instead of just sitting each Sunday in the church pew and getting a salvation message? Not that that's not important, but it's like, I want something more. Yeah.
No, I feel you 100%.
I am a Christian with the searching and skeptical mind of an atheist. I don't want to believe anything that isn't true. I know both sides of the looking glass, and I know them with open eyes. I choose Christ's side. I invite you to join me from wherever you stand before the looking glass. That's this week's episode. Thanks for listening. And remember, you can have your religious cake and eat it too. You can have reason respect for science, a 21st century worldview, and be a Christian.